Hi friends and neighbors, I'm Don. This is part 3 of my Great Guitar Build-Off project. And I want to start with an update to from the first video to the neck. I finished moving all the slots that I needed to move. The first 2 that I did in that video, plus 5 more. So 7 total had to be moved. They are all correct now, correct spot in relation to the first fret. They're all lined up at least as well as I'm ever going to get them lined up. And I'm going to put some B-roll in right here to show that they are lined up. So last time we got this body ready for a top. I still have some more places I think I can lose a little more weight here. And I'll give you a total amount of weight when I'm done. The original Bigsby guitars had birdseye maple. He loved birdseye. He either loved it or he got a good deal on it, or it just really fit into that mid-century aesthetic at the time. So he used a lot of birdseye maple. And so I was thinking about tops. I was thinking about what kind of maple top I could put on there. I don't have any birdseye, but I want to use up what I have here, and I got a lot of stuff here that needs to be used up. What I'm going to use for a top, I haven't talked about it yet because it requires a story. And if you don't want to hear a story, you can skip ahead to that time and the story will be over. But I'm going to tell a story now. Our story begins last fall. On a fairly dry day on a weekend, I spent several hours in my friend ThorNton's backyard. We had the masks and we were apart and outdoors, but we were in the backyard. And what we did there was we took apart a piano. We took a piano from, he had started it a little bit, but we broke it down to its lumber and metal components so we could move it. Some people ask me, why did you waste a piano? Why destroy a piano like that? And the answer is, there's 2 answers to that. One is that in my area, and maybe this is different where you live, but in my area, pianos are worth nothing. People give them away all the time. I can pull up Craigslist right now and see at least a dozen people, free piano, you take it away. People move their houses and leave pianos behind. These kind of pianos that were mass produced for the home market, they don't hold any value. We're used to guitars, you and I are used to guitars increasing in value as they get older, but pianos, it's the opposite. Unless it was a really good piano to begin with, an expensive Steinway or something to begin with, those hold value and those can be worth restoring and have a market for them. But these old home uprights, they just don't hold any value. Second reason is I had a sentimental attachment to this piano because it had belonged to my grandmother. When she was a young woman, she moved from Surrey, British Columbia to Seattle, Washington, and she saved her money and she bought a piano. And we've always kind of got this sense that this was her independence. It was a thing. It was a bit of permanence for her life. She bought this piano because she was a grown-ass woman. I want a piano, I'm getting one. So she bought a piano. Now I learned taking it apart, this piano was made in 1928 by the Gulbranson Company, and it sold nationally for $295. That was list price on this piano. So this was not a whim of hers. This was something she wanted. She had that piano her whole life. It was always in her living room when I was growing up. My siblings and I would pound on it and annoy my grandfather, and she always encouraged us in this kind of thing. She was very encouraging with my music and art interests. We had that in common. After she couldn't live there anymore, the piano went to my parents' house and my dad would play it. He took lessons on his lunch hour. He would leave his office and walk up the street in downtown Seattle to a piano store, take piano lessons, and he played in recitals in his 50s. So then when they moved, it came to me and I had it for a while. I don't really play piano. It was just like everyone else. I didn't want to use up the space. Where the piano was now is a workbench for doing this very kind of stuff. So I was more interested in making instruments than playing piano, so I gave the space over to that. I gave the piano to ThorNton for his kids. They never really caught an interest in it, and so that last year they decided they were done having a piano. And then the difficulty of, it costs money to move, it costs money to tune. There's no one wants pianos. We took it apart. Now there's a lot of good stuff inside a piano. There's a big piece of spruce that I think I can use to make soundboards, but that's not what I'm using. It's not what I'm talking about. So let me show you this. This is one of the treasures we found inside the piano. This is the panel, the place where you would put the sheet music here, and the keys are along the front here. And this is what you'd be looking at as you played the piano. And you can see it's a veneer. It's a nice walnut veneer that's dark stained, and it has beautifully checking. You probably won't be able to see it, but it's beautifully aged checking, probably nitrocellulose, probably not shellac, but it's nitrocellulose of the 1920s. And but if you've ever veneered a panel like this, you can't just veneer one side, you have to veneer both sides or it'll warp. So look what they used on the back, on the inside that nobody would ever see. Look at this beautiful bird's eye. And here's another shot of it, really up close. Another glamour shot of that bird's eye. That is awesome. That is awesome. You can see I started to scrape some of the old finish off. This is a mark in the wood, probably why this piece of veneer was used for the inside, because it has some grain stuff going on in it. But look at all that. It's just gorgeous. And it's not paper thin veneer like we get now. It is maybe 1.5 millimeters thick, on the edges anyway, it looks like. But we're going to find out. So my plan is to first take off this little tray thing, which is held on with some screws. Search the whole thing with magnets for extra metal that might be hiding in there. Then cut this down. And I need to cut the width down a little bit so I can fit it through the bandsaw. Then I'm going to resaw and plane so that I have a little less than 1/4 inch of material here with the bird's eye attached. And then I'll find a place where it matches really well, where I like the grain, and cut out a top for the body. Let's put it way over here where you can see it. There's plenty here. I'm very excited about this, and I've been looking forward to doing it, but I couldn't start it until I told you the story. So let's get to it. Is this a tack? It's just a tack. It's just a tack. Digging deeper into the piano archaeology, you can see that the veneer that I thought was over 1 millimeter thick turned out to be 2 pieces. And there's where's that place where you can see the line? You can see the line here. There are 2 pieces here. So it's half as thick as I thought it was. Still a little bit thick as far as modern veneer goes, but not as luxurious as I thought it was going to be. You can also see here that the inside is green. It's poplar. Poplar for sure. So a bunch of edge glued poplar boards with veneer. There's the dark veneer, and there's the light veneer. And somewhere in here is the serial number for the piano. Here I'm using a marking gauge to draw a line about the thickness that I'll be slicing. That way I can tell if the bandsaw blade is wandering off track. This is the biggest thing I've ever tried to resaw, so I was a little nervous. I thought it would be easier, this whole thing would be easier if it was a big piece rather than a bunch of little pieces. So I kept it the full-size piece. Turns out it would have probably been easier to cut it up small first and then do all the processing to it. Live and learn. You can see the corner here starting to peel off as it warps, which is going to be important to the plot as we move along. I kind of expected it would come out of off the bandsaw straight and then curl up over the next little while, but it really just came off the saw immediately warped, cupped. This is at double speed, by the way. It's not as fast as I usually speed up, but it is faster than real life. Just so you don't think I'm sawing this fast. This is showing how much it's cupped now. And the lovely green poplar. I left a lot of this planing footage in here because I thought it was kind of funny. You could see how it gets harder and harder as I go along. If I could afford it, I would use the yakety sax Benny Hill music on some of this, because it's okay there at first, but then it gets harder and harder to get the thing through the planer. If you're not familiar with how planers work, there are some rollers inside that press down flat on the board. So I knew it would press it flat to plane it flat, but just getting the board in enough to engage with those rollers was tough. There, I had to put my foot up there. So I'm struggling. This is a heavy planer on a heavy stand, and it's walking all over the floor. Trying to move it back into the center, not just for the camera, but also because there's other furniture in the way, and I got to get this big board through there. And it's not going in at this point. Imagine the Benny Hill music right here. I think the board is warping more over time. It's getting more and more arched. It's harder and harder to push through the machine there. Now past me is going to explain all that again. You can hear the exasperation in his voice. Well, I'm less confident in this plan at this point because the way this came off the bandsaw with this warp in it, it was a struggle getting it through the planer. It finally made a nice finish on the poplar, but in the meantime, the rollers and so forth inside the planer chewed into the veneer a little bit. So I'm going to have to take this finish off, get it cleaned up, get it dusted, and see if this is even going to be salvageable. It's, maybe it just ground into the finish, or maybe it's all the way into the veneer. We'll have to see. Oh, all right, onward. Well, I was so frazzled by the planing experience that I forgot all about the plan of carefully selecting which part of the panel I was going to use, and I just went ahead and cut it in 3 equal pieces. It was right about here that I realized the veneer wasn't damaged, it was just the finish, so all's well. couple new problems have arisen. This is pretty clean. I got most of the finish off. The rest will sand off later, but I wanted to clean that so I could do a minimal amount of sanding. But here's what I got to deal with next. Now you saw this when I was sawing this wood. A more experienced woodworker, probably somebody watching right now, would have anticipated that coming and seen it. I was just surprised at how fast this cupped and how fast this curled. It just came right off the saw and curled right up. So then I thought if I could get it through the planer, which you saw was a bit of a struggle, then it would be thinner and be easier to flatten. And I can flatten it. It takes some pressure to flatten it. So I got to wondering about if this is going to be easy enough to press down, or if I glue it onto the body, will the whole body curl up? So I want to flatten this a little better. I think what I'm going to do is try this back through the planer, see if I can take a little bit more of this off, and I'll press it flat and glue some veneer on and see if that holds it up flat. This little piece turned out to be a lot easier to get through the planer than that big piece had been. I mentioned my son in the previous video. A few years ago, someone gave him stacks and stacks of veneer, including this flamed walnut, which is huge, but it's huge enough to cover this entire panel. So that I won't have to piece this together. I can use one piece of veneer across the back of that. And we'll see how that goes. But first I have to find a way to clamp it together. I need to gather up some thick boards and figure out how I'm going to clamp this all together. And that's the next thing you will see. This thing I'm cutting with here is a fabric cutter. It's like a pizza cutter, but really sharp. It's something quilters use. Nobody's quilting at my house right now, but when someone decides to quilt, I will probably owe them a new blade. These thin pieces with the other piece across the middle is to try to clamp the middle, to increase pressure on the middle. These clamps are obviously not long enough to reach the middle, so this creates some leverage pushing down, particularly in the middle. This part's like an unboxing video. Looks like it worked. My clamping call broke, but looks like it worked. For now, anyway, it is pretty flat. There it is. Okay, it's a day later. This is still flat. Proof of concept, but sometimes one problem just leads to another problem. You keep solving problems and at the end you're done. The problem I have now is that my clamping shelf broke. It fell apart, and so it didn't get good clamping pressure on these ends. So I have ripples and bubbles here where it didn't clamp down. The middle is good and along the edges is good, but these areas are rippled. So I need to get those flat. I'm going to try just scraping them and see how it feels after that. It's still going to leave some little pockets in here. Oops, the edge there. It was pretty quickly obvious that scraping wasn't going to work. So I decided to cut out the rough shape of the body. So I only had to replace the veneer that I really had to replace. eagle-eyed viewer will notice that I reversed the pattern between the shot where I was drawing it and the shot where I was cutting it. Not trying to put one over on you. Here I'm just cutting away all the veneer that didn't glue down, everywhere there was a bubble. The rest will just have to be removed. So I'm defining, these are the edges of where I have to remove. I will apply some heat and moisture to melt the glue and peel off what we can. This video would have been a lot shorter if that clamping shelf hadn't broken. One thing I didn't get on camera was cleaning off the old glue with acetone. It worked really well. I just put some acetone on it and scraped it up with a scraper. Before I can glue the top on though, I want to trim up this neck pocket. It's a little bit bigger than the neck I'm using. Put some veneers on the sides. Those will be covered by the top. And then I can route for the exact size of the neck that I'm using. It's hard to clamp right here, so I'm floating in a little very thin super glue, hoping that'll hold the pieces long enough for the wood glue to grab on. Or I could try clamping it with an eraser. I thought I'd try the Ben Crow salt trick here. Sprinkle a little salt on there. Nope, too much salt. Just a little bit of salt. I know we saw something just like this a few minutes ago, but this is the important one. This is the actual top. And nobody can get enough of unboxing videos. Alright, here we are. We've got the whole shape roughly cut out. This top's still got some of the old finish in it, hasn't been sanded yet. And there are still some real slight ripples around the edges that I'm going to have to do by hand. But I wanted to try something before I move on too much. Some plain water. This grain's going to have to be raised and sanded a few times anyway, so there's some water. Let's see if we can get this to show on camera. I'll have to check it out before I'll just rub some water on there, see if that grain shows at this angle. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Now when I really get to work finishing it, I'm going to try to make that pop a little more. One more thing I want to do on this before I close up the chapter, before I finish this up, is this this corner right here. Excuse me, wiggling the camera. This corner right here has never been, it's always been too pointy. This corner has always been too pointy. So put my hand there so it'll focus. But, so I've kind of drawn a little extra, I want to round this off a little bit. I'll just hit that with the spindle sander. I want this to come up roughly parallel to the center line so that this curve doesn't curve back too much. So a little of that off and a little rounded, and it's going to come in a little bit here. This didn't feel like a very glamorous episode, a lot of dirty work, a lot of grunt work, but next time, I'm going to sort out the bridge, route a neck pocket, pick up cavities, and put some binding on here. That'll be fun. So click like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.